Class, this is a podcast describing how to complete problem 2 of our practice. This one has to do with capitalized interest, an asset retirement obligation, as well as a check for impairment. So upon acquisition of the landfill that we're dealing with, we had built it ourselves, and so we spent $5.7 million to build it. But to calculate capitalized interest, we need to first figure out the weighted average of our expenditures. Now, there's 2 ways you can look at this. You can take each expenditure times the rest of the year, since we're going to finish right on the end of the year, and multiply it by the ratio of how many months for the full year. So for instance, on February 1st, it's 11 months out of 12. And you can do each expenditure that way to the end of the year. The other way to do it is to start with the expenditure and then figure out how much of the year until the next expenditure, and then add them together. So you have 1.2 for 3 months, and then spend another 700,000. You get a cumulative amount, 1.9 for the next few months, and so forth. You can see that the end result of either one of them is the same. So either one is fine. The total cost is 5.7. So as we look at the interest, this does not exceed the $3 million that we borrowed for our construction. So we use the 4%. If it had, we would use the weighted average of the other loans for anything above what we borrowed for the specific construction. But we didn't, so we can just take that 2.133 and multiply it by the 4% interest rate and get 85,333. The asset retirement obligation is the present value at 5%, 40 periods, of a future payment of $2 million. So when you do present value, you got to put a 0 in the third argument, and then the 2 million, the final amount, in the last argument. That gives you a present value of $284,000. Add those together to get our total cost. So landfill is debited for just over $6 million. Asset retirement obligation credit for the present value. Interest expense is the credit because that's what we would have debited as we paid the interest. And then while we were building the building or the landfill, it would have been in part of work in progress. So we're going to move that out. We're going to put the whole cost in as an asset at our landfill. Now, to calculate depreciation, we're going to simply take our total cost, including these other items, and divide it by 40. So after 10 years, our total depreciation would be $1.5 million. So our carrying value would be our original cost, over $6 million, minus the accumulated depreciation, so $4.5 million. We're going to do a test for recoverability. When you test for impairment, you compare future cash flows not discounted with the carrying value. So we need to know the carrying value before we can do the test. It says we're going to receive $12,500 per month for the next 30 years. That's 360 months, so that's $4.5 million. That's less than the carrying amount. So it is not recoverable. That means that it is impaired. So then we need to figure out the fair value. So the fair value is using the new interest rate, 8%, for 360 months at the $12,500. The fair value of that landfill is only $1.7 million based on that calculation of present value. So our loss is between the carrying value and the fair value. So that would be our loss on impairment. We can credit the asset and debit loss. Now, as for an asset that has an asset retirement obligation, the asset retirement obligation is going to grow each year. The term that GAAP uses to describe that growth is accretion. So debit accretion expense and credit the asset retirement obligation. So over the 10 years that we had this asset, our asset retirement obligation is growing each year, and this, by the end of year 10, it's $447.19. Actually, by year 10, it's going to be 440 plus the 22. That would be the 10th year. So if in number 5, when it asks us to record the sale, instead of impairment, we go ahead and sell it. We are going to debit cash for the $4 million, credit the landfill for the original cost, debit accumulated depreciation for what we had already calculated, debit the ARO because the new owner is going to assume our liability for that asset retirement. And that's going to give us a loss of $89,314 if we sold it for $4 million. So with an ARO, when the new buyer is going to assume that liability, then we don't have that anymore. We need to debit that. But remember, besides recording depreciation on this landfill each year, we are also recording an increase in the ARO each year. Same way. So instead of going down like our asset is, the liability is going up. So after 20 years, it would be the full amount that we originally decided. After 40 years, I should say, it would be up to $2 million.